here. So hi, are we good?
Yeah.
Got the camera right? And it matches you, I love it. I'm gonna do a quick intro of our guests. I'm sure you guys already know who they are. Does anyone know who Alexandra Bracken is?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Darkest Mind series and the Passenger series. Have we read those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Born and raised in
Darkest
Arizona.
Minds, no. I mean,
She
Darkest
moved
Minds,
east to study
yes.
history and
Passengers,
English at
no.
the College of William and Mary in Virginia. After working in publishing for several years, she now writes full-time. Her work is available across the world in over 20 languages and has been adapted to the big screen. Victoria Aveyard was born and raised in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, a small town known only for the worst traffic rotary in the continental United States. She moved to Los Angeles to earn a BFA in screenwriting at the University of Southern California. I studied at UCLA, so we're fighting right now. She currently splits her time between the East and West Coasts. As an author and screenwriter, she uses her career as an excuse to read too many books and watch too many movies. She is the author of the New York Times bestselling Red Queen series. Have we read that?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Damn right.
Tonight they join us to discuss Silver in the Bone, the first book in another fantasy adventure series, this time inspired by Arthurian legend. Fans of Lore and Legendborn won't want to miss this captivating tale of dark magic. And we just found out it is a New York Times bestseller. Please give it up for Alexandra Bracken and Victoria Aveyard.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. Hello. Oh my god. How beautiful is this new space?
Yes.
Long wood, the well-lit shelves. We love it. I feel like I'm in a spa. Be around so many beautiful books. Hi guys. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out on a Friday night. Yeah. Rush hour in Los Angeles. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Alex, for coming to Los Angeles.
Thank you for coming to do the event with me. I learned today that things in the general Los Angeles metro area are not as close as I thought they were. So you made a journey in.
No, it was fine. It was fine.
I mean, I think you guys are used to it, but I was like, actually, that is a really long distance drive, so thank you.
Not a problem. I would do for you every time. So today we are here to celebrate Silver in the Bone. Silver came out last week, so we're going to do our best to avoid talking about spoilers or anything for those of you who are still reading or have just picked it up tonight. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of the talk, so probably in the last 15 to 20 minutes. So please start thinking of your questions now, because it's really embarrassing when I ask you guys for questions and no one raises their hand. It brings us back to being like bullied kids in school. So don't do that.
Start thinking now. Start brainstorming.
Yes, I've given you your warning. So besides celebrating Alex, we are also congratulating her because Silver in the Bone was #1 on the New York Times bestseller.
Yes.
That's an instant bestseller, by the way. That's a big deal. You've been on the road now for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, so you're getting me at the end of tour, so we might get a little loopy.
Yes.
And by we, I mean me.
So tour for 2 weeks. Woo. Falling apart. I'm so sorry.
You said you needed a rest, right?
Yeah.
Drink your water.
No, are you okay?
You're better than me. I would have run away.
Just slowly backed up and don't find the shell.
Yeah. So 2 weeks on the road, and then in the middle of that, you hit the list. It's like a very high-low. Your brain's all over the place.
Yeah, you kind of run on adrenaline, and you know this too, firsthand. When you're on book tour, it's so fun, but you're kind of delirious the entire time you're on it after the first night, because it's like you're up late signing books, chatting with everybody, and you're an introvert as well. As introverts, that's a lot of extroverting for us, and so you're tired, and then you wake up at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, get on the plane, do the next stop, and it goes on and on and on. So it's really fun, but it's all definitely one big blur.
We definitely charge up our introvert batteries all year long.
Yeah.
To be able to go on here for like a week.
Exactly.
So 2 weeks is pretty mind-boggling to me. How did you celebrate on Wednesday when you found out about the list?
I celebrated by eating, as I often do. I actually was in the middle of stress eating a mini bar, enormous king size pack of Reese's peanut butter cups because I got confused about the time zone we were in. So the list comes out at around like 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. I was like, not Tuesdays, Wednesdays.
5 p.m.
East Coast time. And at the time I was in Houston.
She's already forgotten.
I know.
She doesn't know what state she's in today.
It was kind of surreal too because I somehow got booked into this like very nice suite, which I was not expecting, and like a poodle statue greeted me at the door, and then there was like another one in the bathroom, so I felt like I was kind of hallucinating the entire time I was there. I was like, what are all of these poodles doing in
They're
my
good
room?
luck. Now poodles are good luck.
I
for
know. Oh my gosh. I miss my little poodle guy, but yeah, I was like stress eating this pack and then I was getting sad because I thought we were 2 hours behind the East Coast, but we were actually 1 hour behind. So like at 3 p.m. I was like waiting, and like, you know, it's like 3:10, 3:20, and I was like, oh.
And if they don't call, it's bad.
Yeah.
So you're not on the list.
Like about a half hour after, they'll like kind of, someone will be nominated to send you the sad text of like, oh, not this time. But I mean, at this point, I've had as many books hit the list as not hit the list, so I feel like mostly calm about it. I just was gonna enjoy a thing of Reese's peanut butter cups as I was being calm about it. Yeah, so I really like didn't celebrate because I pretty much immediately had to go and do another event by the time we got the list. So I earned my pants. That's what I did to celebrate. Very exciting.
Well, that leads me into my next question. How many books have you written? Because I have lost count.
I also lost count,
Of
actually.
books.
Yeah.
You've written a lot.
So I got really excited because I was like, oh, this is my 13th book. Like, this is perfect.
Taylor
it's really,
Swift vibes.
No, that was also, and I was like, lucky 13. I flew out on like the 13th, or in the 13th row to Boston for the first event. I was like, oh, so many fun signs from the universe. And then I like actually counted, and I was like, no, it's book number 14. I was completely wrong.
What book did you forget?
I think I wasn't counting the Brightly Woven graphic novel because technically I didn't write it.
It's still your brain.
It's still my brain, still my story. So, but it also would have been like perfect to have this be the 13th book and be like, because it's a little spooky, a little dark. Yeah.
We'll pretend it's your 13th prose book.
Honorary 13th novel.
Yeah, honorary 13th novel. Lucky 13th novel. So because you have written so many books and you've written across genres, you've written across age groups.
Yes.
What would you say is the thing that unifies all of your books? Like, what makes it an Alex Bracken book?
That is a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because one of the things I've been doing, and I know you have also been doing, is figuring out what to write next. So it's sort of like you get to rest on your laurels for approximately 2 seconds, and then you're like, oh yes, I actually have to continue to write in order to continue to have this be my career.
The only time you feel good about not writing is when you're actively on tour and there's still tons of us who write while we're on tour.
I know. Marie Lou finished a book while she was on tour. I didn't even bring my laptop. I was like, I'm a low energy person. I'm going on this journey. And like the bad thing about the pandemic too is I'm already very much a homebody, and that just like fully turned me into a hobbit where I like will occasionally want to go on an adventure, but for the most part I'm like, I want to stay home, want to hang out with my dog and just like eat a couple breakfasts every day. Like
Your dog does look like a hobbit.
he does. He is kind of the hobbit of dogs, really. I've totally forgotten your question. No, I remembered it. Okay. So I think
I have a paper.
I know.
Don't worry.
I think like the one thing that unifies it is like I'm endlessly fascinated with like writing about families, which I was thinking about as I've been brainstorming a new project, and just like the families we choose for ourselves, the families we're born into, how we feel about our families. But also I think that there's always kind of this little element of darkness and emerging from the darkness too, and young women who discover their power and then have to kind of learn how to use it and how to embrace it. What about you? Because you now have written 2 very popular series.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, I was gonna say, like your books also. There's always some something hiding under the surface, like secret societies or this.
Oh yeah, I do love a secret society.
I love that. I love that that's like your niche. It's cool. Things that unite my books, probably like kick-ass women in fantasy settings, and I really, really love manipulating tropes. I love using tropes that are very recognizable to all of us as readers.
You're kind of the
then
queen
kind
of twists.
twisting them a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's what I like, because I also just, we want to give the audience what they want.
Yeah.
You know? We're of that opinion that like that first chapter of a book is a promise to you, and we're making a promise that we want to fulfill. So we never want to put you too far out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I actually would love to hear your answer to this question, not to like, you know, pull
This
away
is
from
about
your preparation. But I was asked the other night about like, is it hard to kill a character? And I'm curious to hear your answer to this, because I actually do find it somewhat hard. Like, like we kind of joke with you guys that we like enjoy being evil and like killing characters and all of that. And maybe there's like this satisfaction that you get from thinking of like a very well developed twist and it like finally coming together. But I always feel kind of sad when I kill off characters. What about you?
There are definitely characters you miss. I feel like I don't feel sad about it, and that to me means like I'm making the right choice.
Yeah.
You should always be removing a character for a reason, and the reason can't just be shocking the audience. It has to serve the story in some way, because you don't want to like anesthetize your audience to the idea of confusing people. You don't want to get to the point where a little bit towards the end of, well, we're still in the Game of Thrones books, but towards the end of the show you were like, I don't connect to anyone anymore because I can't. I feel
Everyone
like I can't.
Everyone I loved is dead.
Right. So that you lose the oomph a little bit when you use it too much.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what I approach from it. It has to serve something in the story. But Realmbreaker, I'm in the end reading the third book right now, and I'm getting towards the end. And I am hitting that moment where I'm like, I actually feel really connected to these people, and I would be really sad.
I was gonna ask, like, do we need to prepare ourselves emotionally for Realmbreaker?
We'll find out. Oh man. So
okay, sorry, I derailed us. I love a tangent, as you guys will come
I'm
to
a
learn.
pro. I can do this. So as much as you have your through lines of all your books, what makes Silver in the Bone different? And it doesn't have to just be like the story is different. What about your craft is different, or just like where you are in your life now as an author?
Oh gosh, this is interesting. It's actually probably my one book that has taken a really long time to come together. For the most part, when I get an idea, I'm brainstorming it over maybe the course of a couple months. But then I'm like ready to dive in, I'm ready to go. Once I know, like, what do you need to know before you start a story? For me, it's sort of the main character's journey, who they are at the beginning of the book, who they are at the end, the big midpoint, which usually is a big twist, and then how the book ends. And usually I can kind of navigate through. And one thing that's really changed, and I started it with this book, was that when I first started writing, when I was writing the Darkest Mind series, I was pretty much just writing by the seat of my pants. I was like pure pantser, intuitive writing, which was really fun, but like created very chaotic drafts. And so I was finding that I was really having to like gut the manuscripts every time I edited them. So I decided to go back and like teach myself more about craft, so I'd be able to articulate my process a little bit better, and I could have that firm bedrock on which to build stories, and so I would not have to completely gut my books every time I had a revision sent to me. And then I found, like, as I was outlining more and more, I was finding it really boring to actually write the books because I knew absolutely everything that was coming. And so now with this book, I've gotten back to writing like a little bit more intuitively and just having like a big picture structure. But one thing that was very different about this one, like I started to say and then went off on a tangent again, was that it took like 10 years for this book to really come together from like the very first idea. And that's very unusual for me. It needed a long time to kind of like stew in the brain cauldron.
Yeah. I think I'm probably in a similar space where you are, where I don't want to lose too much of the magic for myself.
Yeah.
I want to have that element of discovery. So going in, I need to know, you know, my concept, my world, those basic character ideas, but I also structurally, I really need to know where it starts and where it ends. My Act 1 and my Act 3 and midpoint, where the end of Act 2 is. Act 2 is usually where I meander quite a lot, but it is where you find more of the story and you build those characters and have those moments that you can outline all day, but I think character development is the thing that is really hard to outline for.
Yes.
It has to happen kind of naturally on the page, and authors who can write out of order, I don't
I'm glad you said that, because every time someone asks me this question, I was like, my brain is far too feeble to like, I think we call them quilters, is what we call them. Because they're able to kind of quilt together the book. They have like, they'll write out of order, they'll write scenes that they feel inspired to write, and then they'll come back and write the connective tissue between those scenes. And I am fascinated by people that can do this. Like, I think Lee Bardugo writes like this, Susan Dennard writes like this, and I was like, I kind of, again, I have a chaos brain. It is not a logic brain. I feel like logic brains are good at kind of putting the puzzle pieces together. For me, I really want to have the experience of going on that journey with the characters and building the emotion, building, you know, the like momentum of the plot and all of that. So I can't really jump around.
Yeah. The third Realmbreaker book has been the first book where I have actually written almost one chapter out of order.
Interesting.
Because, and it's cheating though, it's because I have so many different POVs and each of them are on sort of their own storylines that are braiding back together, that I was like, oh, I need to develop this further and still be in the mindset of this particular storyline. So I wanted to do that next piece right away.
Yeah.
But then I also kind of am like, wait, but then that's not how the audience is going to have it. So, and I always want to be as close to like your experience as possible, so that we can figure out like, oh, that's bumping, oh, that needs to be explained more, that part. That's really valuable to us when we're writing, is that moment when we've been able to kind of purge our brain of the story.
Yes.
And get those fresh eyes and then come back as like a reader.
How do you actually track all of the various point of views and the separate intertwining plot lines? Like, do you have a system for that?
I have tables, I have like Excel sheets that are color coded and they're very visual and I need to see it. And I have like one that's the timeline and one that's each chapter, and I can kind of move it around if I'm like, this thing happens here, but this is actually 20 days before this chapter, but they're going to be read at the same time. I need to make that clear. And so much of it will never ever matter to you guys.
Yeah. I feel like, to quote Taylor Swift, what if I told you, like, you're a mastermind? Because I like, even
That would
for
be
me,
a
I
great,
was like,
that would be a great TikTok.
I know.
Take it.
Literally, you have to do it. You are my TikTok queen.
Reels. So for everyone in the room who has picked up Silver today, can you give us like the elevator pitch log line?
Okay, so guys, I was really struggling to come up with the pitch for this book, which is interesting because usually when I sit down to write a book, I'm selling a book on proposal or I'm pitching it to my editor or my agent, and I will like figure out, even before I write the summary of the book, what the pitch is going to be. And that's really, for me, like, it's like X meets Y, trying to figure out who the audience is for this book. And for whatever reason, I could not come up with one that like made coherent sense for this book. I was like, it's just vibes, you know? Like, it's like mist and Enya music and like darkness. And
I'm in.
an approaching shadow. Like, it was like impressions and not like an actual pitch. And so I was talking to one of my friends, and I was kind of I was asking her for her opinion about like what the pitch of this book is, or should be rather, and I was complaining to her too because I was starting to get all my professional reviews from like Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and they kept saying the book was horror. It was like a blend of dark fantasy, romance, and horror. I was like, I didn't write a horror book.
But that is kind of, I don't think you write horror so much as you write extremely realistic moments.
Oh, thank you.
Gore. So you're gonna describe that decrepit ass bone that is sticking out of someone's
In loving
finger,
detail.
decaying.
Yeah.
And that to some people will flag as horror, and that to you is, well, that's just what it looks like.
Yeah, and I was just like baffled by this because are you a horror person at all? No. Me either.
I read the Wikipedias of horror movies. And I'm like, well, glad I don't watch that.
I know, if I'm gonna like be forced to watch something that has any sort of horror element, I will always read the Wikipedia summary of it first because it gives you a false sense of control as you're going in, and you like embrace yourself or leave the room.
We're the generation that like The Ring came out and just screwed us all.
Okay, I am so glad that you said this. I've been telling this story on tour and have been very like like so happy that I'm not the only one. And now that you've said this, like
I had a TV in my room when I was like 14, 15.
The Ring is the reason I hate horror films. Like I was fully traumatized by my experience of seeing The Ring, and it wasn't even just that the movie itself was so scary. It was that I was like in middle school, right?
Yeah. My mom took me to see it. She goes, I'm bored. Let's go see a movie. She took me to The Ring. And she regretted that for months.
Oh my gosh. So I went with a couple of my friends, and you know, like when you're in middle school, it's like cool, you know, it's like cool to go to the movies with your friends and not have the parent with you. And I was so damn scared by the end of this movie. You know when that happens at the end where you think it's safe and then it's actually not
I was
safe?
like, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah, like you kind of are like,
We're not okay.
it's masterfully played. I was so scared. I was swearing and sobbing. My body temperature had risen like 40 degrees, and behind me were like all of these really cute high school boys who had also come like as a group of friends, and they were laughing hysterically because I am absolutely losing my ever-loving shit. Like I am crying hysterically. I am so scared. And then I came home and our TV was like in this armoire in the living room, and so I like shut it and then like wrapped something around it like that was gonna keep
That's it.
what's her name? Samara out. And then I slept with the lights on for 3 days. I was that scared. And so
I had to sleep in a room with either a parent or my brother for months. It is, in hindsight, I'm like, they should have sent me to a therapist.
It was, what do you think was so scary? I mean,
it was unsettling. It was the imagery, the music, and then the fact that there wasn't an actual resolution and it just kept going.
Yeah.
That was scary. I remember I saw it on a Friday, and the following Friday, exactly 7 days later, I was back in that same movie theater because my family went to go see a James Bond movie. And I had to go to the bathroom by myself in the middle of the movie, and I had to walk out into the empty theater and go into the bathroom, and I thought, it's been exactly 7 days since I watched that movie. She's crawling out of the toilet.
She's coming. She's coming. Her little black wig is coming. Was anyone else deeply scarred by The Ring?
Yes.
Anybody? Okay. This is a safe space for
Haven't
all
seen
of us.
it.
This is actually a
Haven't
support
seen
group
it.
for...
We were gonna meet like every 7 years, every 7 days. Gosh.
We have
oh my
a
gosh.
videotape to show you all.
No, that was like, but that's such good storytelling that stays with you. And like, I think our goal too as writers is just to write a story that is emotional enough that it stays with you. Because I think our strongest memories are born from our very emotional moments, whether that's like fear or happiness or sadness or embarrassment, unfortunately, about the embarrassment.
That was a
part.
really good way to land the plane and bring it back.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned silver has been in your brain for 10-ish years.
Yes.
That is really fascinating to me, and I really want to know, like, what was the first inkling you had of silver? Like, what was that first piece of the DNA? And when did you realize, like, oh, this is a book and I'm going to write it?
Oh my gosh. Are you... Okay, are you guys ready to go on a journey with me?
Yeah.
Okay, there's like no quick way of telling this story, and you just have to fully embrace it. And if there are young children, we might need some earmuffs.
Not paying attention.
So,
She's thinking about the toys.
okay,
And down.
yeah.
Elsa up and down. She's going up and down.
Yeah. We are going up and down. I didn't even give you the pitch for the book. I just realized this.
Yeah, we went right into the ring.
Yeah. It's like a young Indiana Jones, a young female Indiana Jones that crosses into Arthurian legend. And this was the horror part that my friend highlighted, and I was like, oh yeah, now I get it. She's like, with like a dash of The Last of Us, and I was like, that is it. It's like the essence of zombie. But anyway, back to your current question. I'm all over the place.
We're just rolling
I told
through the questions. She doesn't have to answer them.
Yeah. I'm like, next. No, okay, so let me pull out my phone, because forgive me, it's like almost easier to read from Wikipedia. Okay, so about 10 years ago, my dad had been recently diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was the person who got me into fantasy. He could always be found reading like a mass market paperback of a fantasy book like every single night before bed. He reread The Lord of the Rings every single year. And he was also the person who really introduced me to my love of history. That was something we shared. And so we were talking after his diagnosis about, like, he was telling me he regretted essentially that he had never looked into our family's genealogy, because that was something that had always interested him, and he just never got around to doing it. And so I was like, I volunteer as tribute. I will happily do this research. And I fired up Ancestry.com and bought a subscription to it, and I just like went to work. Has anyone ever done their family tree on Ancestry.com? Yes. Now it's actually, I think, a little bit easier because so many people have done their family trees that you can be like, thank you, and kind of like piece together from other people's trees. It's really fascinating and kind of like heartwarming when you realize like how connected you are to so many people you've never met and probably never will meet in your entire life. But I was going through my dad's family line of the tree, and like one of the really interesting things I've been thinking about a lot lately is the fact that it is actually a real privilege to be able to find information about your ancestors and your family line, because that is absolutely not the case for everybody. And I've been thinking a lot about how we lose a lot of our family stories, oftentimes within like a generation or two. It can go just in an instant. So parts of my family tree are like I cannot access because the records are in Greek, the church burned down, like other parts are German, I can't speak German, so I mostly was able to trace like the English sides of both my mom and my dad. And so my dad's side like turned up interesting ancestors, like somebody who got like beheaded for treason, and it's like, sucks to be you, I'm kind of into this. You know, like things like that. And on my mom's side of the family, though, we had always had these two names in our family. One was Carrington and one was Cabell. And if you are familiar with the Darkest Minds, you might recognize the name Carrington. That's Chubbs' middle name, who's Charles Carrington Merriweather. Very fancy name for him. But I included that just as like a little family Easter egg. So as I was going through my mom's side of the family, I told you this is a bit of a journey. I was like, oh, here's the moment the Carrington married the Cabell, and the names like entered kind of the family line. So I was going back through the Cabells, and when you have an ancestor that has like a lot of records associated with them that you, of course, then have to purchase from Ancestry.com to access, it'll show up as little leaves, appropriately enough, because you're working on your family tree. And so there were all sorts of leaves on one of these ancestors. He is my 7 times great uncle. And I'm going to read from his Wikipedia page, which is
a relative with a Wikipedia page.
My favorite thing about this is that the Wikipedia page presents this all as fact. So, okay, this is...
There's a crest.
There's a family crest. Oh, yes. Okay, so his name was Squire Richard Cabell. He lived in the kind of late 17th century in Devon, England. So he was like near the moorland. So, okay. I'm sorry in advance. Squire Richard Cabell, known to posterity as, quote, Dirty Dick, lived for hunting and was what in those days was described as a, quote, monstrously evil man. He gained his reputation for, amongst other things, immorality and having sold his soul to the devil. Again, this is all presented as fact on this Wikipedia page. There was a rumor that he had murdered his wife, but spoiler alert, he actually did not do that thing. And like, in reality, this guy was probably just like a horrible landlord, right? And like, he hunted on someone's land and probably shouldn't have. We'll get back to that in a second. Sold his soul to the devil. Okay. So, on the 5th of July, 1677, he died and was laid to rest in his tomb. The night of his interment saw a phantom pack of hounds come baying across the moor to howl at his tomb. From that night on, he could be found leading the phantom pack across the moor, usually on the anniversary of his death. If the pack were not out hunting, they could be found ranging around his grave, howling and shrieking. And so, in an attempt to lay his soul to rest, the villagers built a large building around the tomb, and then to be doubly sure he'd stayed in there, they put a huge slab over the top of it. So that's Squire Richard Cabell.
You know, if my eternal punishment is to run around with a bunch of dogs.
I know. I was like, this is pretty bad. My favorite thing about this, aside from the fact that, again, the Wikipedia page presents this completely as fact. It's not according to local legend, it's Squire Richard Cabell was a monstrously evil man. I love the idea of the villagers just being like, we hate this dude, we're gonna make up some really nefarious
Some
stories.
girl 300 years from now is gonna read an article on something that doesn't exist, and she's gonna think, wow, you can write a book about it.
So, but this was so interesting to me because, does anyone like Sherlock Holmes? Okay, he is supposedly one of the inspirations for the Hound of the Baskervilles. That's he heard that local legend and was like, interesting, perhaps there's a story there. But this really like sent me down a rabbit hole of research because I cannot help myself about like the black dog folklore of the British Isles, the wild hunt, and there's like a really interesting way it crosses into like some of the earliest Arthurian legend from the Welsh side of the tradition. And I just like had this in the back of my mind for like years and years and years, and I was like, there's a story there, I cannot quite figure out what it is. And then more recently, maybe like 3 years ago at the start of the pandemic, when like all we really wanted to do was go on an adventure. I would have gladly gone on a 2-week book tour at the start of that pandemic just to like get out of the house. I just was like thinking more and more about like treasure hunts and wanting to write a book about a treasure hunt. And it sort of all came together kind of magically. Like all of these various little pieces were sort of swirling around. I know, Richard was leaning over my shoulder being like, it's this idea now, please? But yeah, I love the idea that they like put a slab over his tomb like that was going to keep the phantom hounds
Yeah,
from coming back.
that'll do it. So, similar to, you know, delving into a little bit of the King Arthur lore, there is so much King Arthur lore. How did you kind of pick and choose what you were going to draw from, like what people would expect and you had to honor, but also make your own?
Yeah, so I feel like King Arthur was sort of like the original fan fiction in a lot of ways. Like everyone had like a go at it eventually, one point or another. It kept kind of coming back in popularity and then it would fade, then would come back again. The Victorian era was like a big resurgence of Arthuriana. I did not name my dog Tennyson because I love the Tennyson Arthurian poems. I named him because when he was a puppy, it looked like he had enormous sideburns. That's a little tortured, a little bit like a poet. But amazingly enough, I actually really did not like Arthurian legend when I was a kid. Like, do you remember when you were introduced to it?
It was probably Sword in the Stone.
Yeah.
The Disney cartoon.
That's what I'm thinking too. And I think I just like, the justice-oriented child that I was like, I hate that like it has an unhappy ending. It's really sad. He dies at the end.
Yeah.
Like he's betrayed by his loved ones.
Oh, and the Sean Connery one first.
Oh yeah. That's a classic. Oh my gosh. But I just like really could not get on board with it. And that was very unusual for me because I loved fairy tales and I loved Greek mythology. And I've been asking this at like every tour stop, but you know how there are like horse book girlies? I feel like there are also Greek mythology
They're 1000%
girlies.
are.
Yes. So that was me. And like
Delaire's Book of Greek Myths.
yes.
That's where it's at. Edith Hamilton.
So good. But like I read like Greek mythology is so dark. Like parents eat their children in it. Like
That was the first book.
Yeah.
That was the first story.
It was just crazy, and I don't know why I just like couldn't get on board with Arthuriana. And then I ended up taking a class in Arthurian literature my senior year because I had sold my first book and I was looking for kind of a blow-off class. Second semester, that one was not that hard to pass because there were not any actual exams. It was just writing papers. So I was like, I am on board with this. Like I can handle this. But I ended up really loving all of the stories that kind of surrounded Arthur and the history of all of how all of these stories came to be and how like certain iterations were sort of like almost like the gossip rag version of King Arthur and like anyway.
There's so many Knights of the Round Table too.
Yes.
I just had to like open the Wikipedia of that for something in current, and it's, you know, you think it's gonna be like 12 guys.
Why did you open that up?
It was for Realmbreaker stuff actually. It was like for Steam inspiration, and it's like 40 guys, and you think, oh, they weren't in the cartoon.
I know, I kind of wondered if like after a while people were like, I guess I gotta invent a new knight. Like everybody just kind of added 7 knights to it. That would have been a big table if there were 40 knights around it. I'm just gonna say.
I would be squished.
Yeah. But I think like what's always interesting is like when you're looking at folklore and myth to find like where the gaps are in the story and if there's like a story in those gaps. So for me what was so interesting was that like even though you had like sorceresses or priestesses depending on the versions you read, and you had this like mystic isle where like somebody like Arthur upon his death could like exist in this sort of sleeping state until he was needed again. No one really wrote about that in any of the older stories, and so I knew from the outset that I really wanted to write a book that utilized Avalon, in part because I could do almost whatever I wanted with it, and it would still, you know, not conflict with
Right, and there's something to be said for there being so many versions
Yes.
that there's room for more.
Exactly. And I wanted, knowing that so many of the Arthurian stories are centered on brotherhood, I really wanted to write a story centered on sisterhood. So Avalon became like the perfect location to play around with that.
I did not send her the questions ahead of time. That was a perfect segue into my next question. You're really deliberate, or at least it reads as very deliberate in the ways that you're portraying relationships. Because a lot of books now are very much like, it's enemies to lovers and we're only going to talk about that. And you do have that in here, but you also have a really strong friendship. And you also have a really healthy sibling relationship, which I think is quite rare still to see in YA. So what was the thought process there?
I mean, you know, we both have brothers. We both have younger brothers.
Yeah, we do. They drove us to fantasy.
I actually, growing up, was much closer to my younger brother than I was to my older sister. I think my sister and I were like too close in age, and we were just like natural enemies in some ways. Because she was kind of like the very popular, beautiful one, and I was like, I'm gonna stand and write my fan fiction for strangers on the internet. Like, that was me, pretty much all through high school. And so, my sister was very cool and popular, and I was not, and there was some conflict there. We would steal each other's things all the time. But the one thing I love about sibling relationships is that you are essentially forced to be on the same team as these people for at least 18 years. You have no choice in the matter. You're thrust into it. And you kind of have to figure out how to make it work, but you like understand that person in a way that you don't necessarily come to understand, like, well, I guess like some of our friends feel like siblings to us, but like the sibling relationship is so unique because it's like something that you are forced into, but you get to know each other in such a way that like your sibling is usually the one who knows exactly where to stick the dagger, the emotional dagger for maximum damage, like, and it's like this push and pull constantly where like in some moments you feel like you're rivals with one another for your parents' attention, and others you're on the same team battling against your parents. And I love the flow of that. It's just so unique to have the sibling relationship in your life. But I really wanted to honor that with Tamsin and her brother Cabell, who aren't actually blood relatives. They are, you know, chosen siblings, you could say. And I wanted to have relationships. I mean, stories are born out of conflict, right? So like you have to have a lot of conflict in all of these relationships. So people who are not easy friends, you have a sunshine and grump trope, but it's friendship rather than a romantic relationship. Playing around with that too. But I think it's really, sometimes it does a disservice to a story to like boil down a relationship to a specific trope. They're useful though for like letting people know that there's something inside you might like. Yeah. How do you feel about like marketing by trope?
I think there's like you said, there's a use for it. The shorthand works. It's helpful to both like the publishing side of things, when people in-house are talking about books and they want to just quickly be like, here's what it is. And sometimes you have it's this meets this, and you're like, wow, that sounds amazing. And sometimes you're like, I don't know how the hell that works. I want to know. And then in terms of us facing readers and audience, now we have so many different pieces of social media where we are connecting with you guys. And also, like, let's be real, we're trying to sell our books. We're trying to find new readers to sell our books to. The best way to do that is to be like, my book is this thing. And how do we quickly and flashily do that?
Yeah.
It's this meets this. It's this thing that I like. It's this thing that you like. Maybe you'll like this too.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you about social media.
Oh.
I'm gonna go ahead. So we both go back and forth on like the value of social media and the obligation that we have to be present and like make content. You've been really out front with Silver in the Bone. You've done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And not just with like
Who knew?
making the 15-second bite videos. You do a lot of live videos and a lot of like long form connection with your readers.
Who knew that we would have to become cinematographers and video editors?
So and I know we both get a lot of questions from aspiring writers who feel really daunted by the idea of having to include social media in like the thought process of being a writer. So where do you sort of stand on it? Is it like a blessing, a curse, a catch-22, a double-edged sword?
That's like, it's so interesting because on one hand it's like you meet people you never ever would have met in your whole life. You make connections with readers where you learn things from people. You can get information very quickly. Like if you ask for advice, you will suddenly get a wealth of knowledge coming your way. It was amazing on this tour to meet people that I've been talking to for years online, and most of the time when I meet them, unless they say, oh, my handle is like,
or they have like
yeah.
their little Twitter picture.
Yeah, where you can like only see part of their face,
Right.
and so they feel very shy about introducing themselves by their handle. But if that is you, please do that, because we want to be able to like make that connection.
And because we're sitting here
Yeah.
like, you look familiar, but I don't want to say anything because I've seen a lot of people this week.
I have like really creeped a lot of people out on this tour with like, we've met before, right? And they're like, no, we haven't. I'm like, are you sure? She looks so familiar. Maybe we've met in a past life, and then that like deepens the creep out factor.
Yes. The nice to see you trick is what always works.
Yeah, pleasure to see you.
We're not going to say nice to meet you ever. We're going to say nice to see you. Yeah. We'll know why.
I will say I'm terrible with names, but I'm pretty good with faces for the most part, except when I greatly mess up, as I just discussed.
I'm definitely one of those people where someone says their name and it immediately disappears out of my brain. And I wish I see the value of doing what Anna Faris does in The House Bunny, where she goes.
I remember that.
Because it works. I remember having these things.
Oh my god. I have not thought about that in so long, and now I'm gonna have to start doing it.
I'm gonna ask. I have a couple more questions to pad out, but I'm gonna ask one more before I see if you guys have anything. You have a really interesting insight into publishing because before your life as an author, you worked on the other side. You were in publishing, and I really value your perspective of having seen both. And it's really nice to be like, hey, is this normal? And you're like, actually, yes, and this is why they're doing that, or no, that's not normal, or whatever. So could you trace that journey for us, the starting at a publisher and then becoming an author? Because you kind of did both of those things.
Yeah, I guess one question I don't know if we've ever discussed this, but like when you were a kid, did you know you wanted to be?
It was something I wanted, but I didn't really see a path forward to, because it's not like, oh, you go to medical school and then you do residency and then you do this, that, and this, and now you're a doctor. There's no stratified sort of ladder to this job, and it's the same with entertainment. Even though some parts of entertainment do have like, you be an assistant here, and then you're this, and then you're a script coordinator. There's no set path, and there's no one path. So it's hard to see the way forward. The only thing I do is be like, how did you do it?
Yeah.
We find the overlaps.
Yeah. I feel like I knew as a really young kid, I had that, please raise your hand if this was also you as a child. Like, did anyone else have just like this very deep sense of their destiny as a kid? I think that happens for some people. It was like this for my dad too, but whereas I was like in 3rd grade, I'm gonna be an author one day. My dad was like, I'm gonna work in commercial real estate. But like you kind of, sometimes you just know, and that's a true blessing. Like when you kind of know what you want your purpose to be and you can work towards that from a really young age. So I wrote my first book when I was a freshman in college, and thank the good Lord that it will never be seen by anybody, because that book was like, it was a lot. It got rejected by pretty much every single person in the entire publishing industry that was agenting at that time. And so I was like really defeated by this in the moment. Because would you agree that like when you're on your journey to becoming a traditionally published author, you have to maintain like the slightest level of delusion? It's like delusional belief in yourself and your self-worth and your project. Like you have to just like truly believe that it can happen for you.
And also really, really heavy level of shame.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, it's like you just have to believe in your story first before anybody else can believe in it. And so I wrote a second book while I was in school, and that was ultimately the one that sold. But when I sold that book, it was not enough money to live off of. It was a really great way to kick off my savings for my journey into adulthood. But I knew I had to get a job. Yeah, still happening. But I knew I needed like an actual day job, and I could eventually hopefully save enough that I would feel comfortable to quit my day job and write full time. And so my dad so desperately wanted me to be a lawyer, like so badly wanted me to be a lawyer. Like he once tried to bring me in to like help him at his job. He's like, can you come in and like help me organize all these files? And he just so happened to call his lawyer friend. to see if she wanted to go get lunch
This
with
is like
us.
a Greek arranged marriage, but
Yes.
with being a lawyer.
I know. He was determined that one of his children was going to be a lawyer, and it's like kind of sad for my sister and brother that he was like, I guess it just has to be Alex.
He knew really early.
Yeah, he was like, it's not going to be the other two. The other two are special in their own ways, but not as potential lawyers.
Wow.
But I like, as he like called this poor woman, he put her on the spot. Like, he's like, "Do you want to go get lunch with us so you can like talk to my daughter about being a lawyer?" And she's on speakerphone. I don't think realizes this. She goes, "Why would she ever want to be a lawyer? It's awful." And he's like, "No, it's great." Like panic, like taking her on speakerphone.
She was right.
So he like, and I'm such a people pleaser to my core that I would have gone to law school to make my parents happy, essentially. And he signed me up to do some LSATs, or like LSAT prep courses. And I just remember the first time I cracked open like a practice LSAT test. I like looked down at these logic puzzles and I'm like, what are these like goblin riddles? Like I cannot like
So you
again.
weren't Elwood's.
No, I'm not like a logic brain.
179.
I once took a math test in like high school and I don't know how I got the correct answer. I like, you had to show your work. It was like one of those. And I just like, I don't know what I was doing. I was like channeling some deity, I guess. And I just like wrote out like all of these numbers and somehow I got the right answer. And my teacher circled it and was like, well, I don't know how this happened, but this is technically correct. Like, so he's like, I'm not even going to take a point off, even though I literally don't know how you got this answer from this. So my brain just is not like not a math person, not really a science person. And so I was in the middle of taking the LSAT back in Arizona, and I like suddenly had this like, again, sense of destiny where I sat back in my chair and was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. What am I doing here? I am like already coming up with my lawyer escape plan of like, I will work as a lawyer just long enough that I can like repay all of the horrible like student loans that I'll get from going to law school for a job I never wanted. And so when
That's the way to do it.
I know. I don't know why I didn't even just cancel the LSAT score because I sort of gave up literally halfway through the test. But when I got the actual,
You took the test?
I finished it out. I wasn't gonna like get up and leave. That would have been incredibly
expensive
dramatic.
test.
It is an expensive test. So I sort of like winged the rest of it, and I just felt like so light as I was leaving. And then I got the actual score, and I was like, oh Jesus, I should not have just winged it. And so I really was like at a loss for what to actually do as a day job. And by like weird coincidence, my college, William and Mary in Virginia, if you've ever been to Colonial Williamsburg, it's at one end of it. Wonderful nightlife there.
How many bonnets did you
I did not own any bonnets because actually the reenactors had to have like master degrees in history. They are like very, very intense about it. Interestingly enough, again, a tangent, there's like one house within Colonial Williamsburg that is open for students to live in. They're almost like student ambassadors to Colonial Williamsburg, and the girls who are living in it this year are, they have like a TikTok account if you're curious about what it's. You said it to me.
Did I?
Yeah.
That's what TikTok did to my brain.
No. Oh my gosh, I basically only go on TikTok now for the raccoon drive-through. I'm finding a way to bring up the raccoons at
What is
every
the
single event. Oh my gosh, raccoon drive-through. I'm so glad I'm not the only one who knows about this, because otherwise it would feel like a hallucination. But it's like, this woman one day just noticed that there was like a raccoon staring at her through her kitchen window, so she like slid it open and just gave it like the leftovers for
I hate
dinner.
that they have little hands.
Oh, I love that.
No, they have fingerprints.
They do. They have little, like, very human-like hands, and so now she just like presents the raccoon food every day, and she's like, raccoon loves eggs and cat food.
She is gonna get
and like, I don't
gonna
know,
get
and like Fruit Loops, and like I was
The
very.
Fruit Loops don't cure disease.
I know, but like the raccoons are also very picky, and they don't like lasagna.
They're literal beggars.
I know, but they like won't eat the lasagna. They won't eat the pizza that she gives them. Like, they reject the mac and cheese. They're like, I want eggs. And
Those are anti-Italian raccoons.
I know. Gosh, I just relate to them because I felt like a raccoon. From
I should go.
The Greek jumped out. No, I just like, I feel like my writing life for like all of my college years, and as I was writing the Darkest Mind series, I was like living the life of a raccoon where I was like up at all hours of the night, like eating junk food, writing these books. But Okay, so we got off the topic with
You brought
tracking
it back.
food.
You did it again. You brought it back.
Did I?
Yep, a little junk food raccoon writing books.
Yeah. Wait.
So you went from college to publishing.
Yes. Okay. That was the actual question. I told you guys, you're like getting me on when I'm running on fumes. So my college, by like weird coincidence, had a scholarship program for one of the publishing courses, and I remember this so vividly, going into the career center and just being like, "Help me, please."
One publishing job.
I was like, "Please, Mom, like I don't know what to do with my life." And she's like, "Well," and I was telling her about like that I was trying to get this book published and I was querying agents, and she's like, "Well, you know so much about publishing, so like why are you not thinking about working in publishing as your day job?" And like, by fate, they had a scholarship to one of the publishing courses. There was one at Columbia University, New York University, and it was sort of like a crash course in publishing that you could attend the summer after graduating. And so I was lucky enough to I split the scholarship with someone, and I was able to do the Columbia publishing course, and then I got my first job. The entire time I was in the publishing course, I was like, I do not want to be an editorial assistant. I do not want to be an editor. That is not my strength. I won't have any time to work on my own books because so much of being an editor is working at home, reading at home. And then of course the first job that was ever offered to me was an editorial assistant, and I was like, well, we're taking this one because I gotta pay for my apartment. Yep. And then eventually I was able to move into doing marketing, which has a slightly better work-life balance for writing books at like midnight to 4 a.m. every weekend. So that's what I did, and that was my journey into publishing. If you have any questions about working in publishing, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes. On that note, does anyone have any questions to ask us before we start?
Do you dare?
Yes.
So I read this at the back of Kristen Kashore's book where she said, someone taught me to think like a novelist. What does that mean to you?
Unhinged.
I was like, the immediate things that spring to mind were like not actually nice things.
How to think like a novelist. I guess I'm always looking for like the reasoning behind someone's behavior, like the story of why they are reacting the way they're reacting. And I wonder if that's just like becoming a better human and being like compassionate.
Empathy.
Yeah. But like I watch a lot of reality TV, and there are definitely moments where I'm like, Jen Shah is reacting this way because she's going to prison.
I did drive by all the billboards in Salt Lake City for the Beauty Lab and Laser, and the hashtag under it's like, if you know, you know. It's like, I do know. I do know. Yeah, I think thinking like a novelist is really just like looking for the core of emotion and like even just your day-to-day life, like why people do the things that they do. Like I think life is filled with tiny like heartbreaking moments, and it's like thinking about those moments and stopping to appreciate them, and also thinking about just like, I don't know, that was a really interesting question. Did she even elaborate on what she meant?
No, that's why I'm asking.
She just teed that up for us.
I know.
Yeah, I also think we were probably also thinking like really weird things.
I know. Yeah.
To the adjacent to like living in the real world, there's always these stories about like George Lucas is a total space cadet, and you can see that like one of his eyeballs is somewhere else. And I think we probably do that where sometimes I'll walk into a room and I'll be like, if aliens came,
Yeah.
this is what I would do.
I'm super good at catastrophizing every single situation I'm in. Like
Tsunamis, we gotcha.
there was oh my gosh, I was in the hotel room, and for whatever reason the power went out, and immediately my brain is like, an earthquake is coming. Although like the earthquake would come before the power outage. I just like
Depending on where it is.
Here.
Depending on where it is.
I wonder. I'm so curious about what happened. But I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. No. Like my immediate thought was like, does she mean like when I steal people's names from
Oh yeah.
like signing lines? Like I will sometimes just like, if I like a name, I will take your sticky note and just set it aside.
Or similar to like always looking for the story and being aware that every single one of us has a story.
Yes.
There's that sort of uprise of people who are like, no, they're just an NPC in my life. And you're like, but they have their own life and their own time and their own thoughts.
Main character energy.
Yeah.
A path that got them to where they are right now, crossing your path.
Exactly. That was a really nice way of putting that.
Thank you. I will never say
Thank you.
So. More questions? Yeah?
So, Alexandria, I heard that your your book Lord is being adapted into a movie now, thanks to Universal.
Yeah, so some recent news. She's a bestseller.
So my question is, how do you feel of your book becoming another YA adaptation, considering of The Darkest Minds?
Right, yeah. So this was a really interesting experience. The rights were optioned, and I feel like this is the one audience I don't have to explain what a film option is to. I just was thinking about that. Does anyone not know? I can briefly sum it up. No, I think we're good. It was optioned pretty in March of 2021. So I have sat on this news for many months now, many years, and it was a relief to finally be able to talk about it. But I will say, having had the experience of the Darkest Minds film and not really being involved with it, and not really being allowed to be involved with it, it definitely helped give me some education on the things I needed to look for and ask about and get into a contract for any future work I was going to option. Because back in the day, I will be brutally honest and say that when The Darkest Minds was initially optioned in 2011, I think, even a year or so, a couple months before the book came out, that was peak, let's option every single book in YA that's coming out that could potentially be, that could potentially be the next Hunger Games or the next Twilight. All the studios were just optioning everything. So the wisdom at the time from my agent, from other authors, from everyone I worked with was girl, take that money and run. They will probably never, ever, ever make this into a movie, but if your goal is to save money and build this nest egg and safety net for yourself to eventually write full-time, that's free money. But the consequence of free money is if they actually do end up making it and you have not negotiated any sort of protections into the contract. So
They also get you when you're a baby and you don't have any power and you can't bargain.
And I will say, on the whole, I think now the contracts are a lot more favorable to authors.
Well, it's almost like they've seen that having the authors involved is a good idea.
I know. I will say, it was very strange that I was you don't want my opinion on anything? I've had 10 years of feedback on this book.
Yes, that is the thing that we bring the most value on.
Yeah.
Not just I immediately know the answer to why does that character do that thing? It's well, in book 30.
Yeah.
But we also hear you guys. We
Yes.
are the ones who are connected to you more so than any production company or director or actor or whatever.
Yeah.
So we know the lines that you're that's not in the movie or the TV show. I will riot.
The second they told me Liam was going to have a southern accent, I was oh girl, you in danger. Alright.
Or they'll say oh, we're gonna kill off this character, and I'm you're gonna have a really hard time at book 4.
Okay, I know that we're almost out of time, but this is an interesting question for you because you went to school for screenwriting, right? So, and you've actually been kind of,
Yes.
I'm I accidentally revealed some news I should not have about our friend Susan, so now I'm very scared to do it for you. I'm sorry. So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without getting you potentially into trouble or revealing something I shouldn't. Your involvement with Red Queen adaptation has been
really good.
Yes.
When it was on the feature side of things and we were having a really hard time cracking it, I was not involved there and I didn't have time to be involved there. And then when we changed gears to considering it as a series and then a streaming series, I had a nice gap in my schedule where I could be super involved and they were very open to that. And I was also you don't need me, I don't want to step on any toes, and I got another job. But I had a lovely time working on that and getting to see a little bit more of how frustrating, especially the TV processes and how many different approvals and different people every step has to go through.
I do remember you going through the various pitching for it too, and how intense that was.
Yeah.
And it was Godspeed, my friends.
I hear helicopters. But it's ticking, it's moving along. I'm really happy with the progress we've made.
Good.
And I don't know how much more I can say.
Okay. We'll keep it secret and keep it safe.
Thanks.
Maybe one more quick question if anyone has one. You okay?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I saw your hand first.
Cool. Just curious for the both of you, since you both have had very successful series and books out. How do you think your writing has developed or changed throughout the years, and throughout the different books and 2 different franchises and such?
I think inevitably the more you write, the more your stories kind of deepen a little bit because you've gained lived experience too. You've you know, worked with editors up to that point, your knowledge of story changes. You dig a little deeper with each book to kind of challenge yourself to write a better book, to write a different book. I always want to take a big swing when I'm writing a story, and sometimes I completely miss, but at least I've taken the big swing.
Yeah.
What about you?
That's a really good point. And I was thinking of, hopefully with every book you are becoming a better writer. And you always want someone to say like, oh, well, I really like this book better than this book, because you want to be improving constantly. There is one thing I feel like becoming a published author that is like a teeny little bit of a double-edged sword is you suddenly are very aware of an audience,
Yeah.
and are very aware of readers, and it's hard to shut that out and kind of work in a vacuum the way you did with whatever the first book was, and getting back to that very instinctual, I am writing this story the way it is demanding to be told, not thinking, well, it's for this and I want to avoid this and I want to amplify this.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for knowing your audience as well. Thank you, good question.
Yeah, thanks for your questions.
I think that is all the time
Yeah.
we have, and now we're going to sign some books.
Thank you for joining us in our book covers with hands holding swords.
Yeah, right? This is why they put us together. We don't know each other at all.